Truth first.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines coming out of China and the region. President Trump says Nvidia and other US chip makers can sell their advanced H200 chips to approved consumers in China after months of pressure from industry leaders. He says the move protects national security and jobs, while Nvidia welcomes the decision amid ongoing US-China tech tensions. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Japan's claim that fighter jets targeted radar on Japanese aircraft is completely unacceptable. Japan calls the encounter dangerous, while China accuses Tokyo of repeatedly approaching and disrupting its navy during training. Japan lifts tsunami warnings after a 7.5 magnitude quake injures at least 30 people and forces around 90,000 to evacuate in northeast. Small waves were recorded, power is back on, and authorities warn the risk of a major aftershock remains high for a week. Thailand says it is moving to expel Cambodian troops as fighting along their disputed border intensifies, with Cambodia reporting 6 dead. Both sides blame each other as the violence undermines a Trump-brokered ceasefire that halted earlier July clashes. A final US defense spending bill would force the Pentagon to end its reliance on China and other foreign suppliers for electronic displays by 2030. The measure is part of this year's National Defense Authorization Act, which could face a vote in Congress this week. New Zealand says its Navy's largest ship saw a Taiwanese warship and was shadowed by 7 Chinese vessels while transiting the Taiwan Strait last month. Defense officials say all ships kept a safe and professional distance during the passage. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says under-16s will be blocked from having social media accounts from tomorrow, with platforms facing tough penalties for non-compliance. He urges teens to see the world-first ban as protection from what he calls endless algorithmic pressure. The US Justice Department says 2 men are in custody for allegedly smuggling Nvidia H100 and H200 chips to China, even as President Trump approves limited H200 exports. Prosecutors allege they worked with contracts in Hong Kong and China to evade US export controls. Now, those are the headlines of the hour when we start with our top story. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has told his German counterpart Johann Waipel that Japan is threatening China militarily, which, he added, is completely unacceptable. This comes as Japan accused Chinese fighter jets of aiming their radar at Japanese military aircraft. Japan denounced the encounter as a dangerous act. Meanwhile, China blamed Japan for sending aircraft to repeatedly approach and disrupt the Chinese Navy as it was conducting previously announced carrier-based flight training east of Miyako Strait. Relations between the two countries have soured in the past month since Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi warned that Japan could respond to any Chinese military action against Taiwan if it also threatened Japan's security. Okay, now joining us is Andrew K.P. Liang. He is an independent Chinese strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Andrew, China says Japan's pilots approached and disrupted a PLA carrier drill, but the Japanese Defense Ministry says Chinese jets locked their fire control radar on a Japanese aircraft. That's an objectively dangerous act in aviation. Are you saying, do you think that Tokyo fabricated this?
Well, it's a question of action and reaction, and two sides speaking from where they stand. First of all, the reality remains agree on both sides. Is that reality A is that there is a military kind of training on the Chinese side. Reality two, there was the Japanese fighter jets monitoring these drills, and of course, the China responded, and the Japanese saying that well, this is an aggression, and the Chinese say, well, you are interfering with my naval training. So I think that this is a typical action and reaction narrative on both sides. But looking at the situation more in depth, it is also caused by the ascendance of Takaichi, the first female prime minister who is known to be an anti-China hawk for her past track record. And also she represents the rise of Japanese militarism. This militarism denies Japan's any past guilt. It has never advocated or supports any apology for what Japanese did during the Second World War, unlike Germany. So that rubs salt in China's wounds because China was suffer hugely from Japanese invasion. And of course, Beijing continues to oppose the rise of militarism in Japan as it sees that this will stabilize the region, not least because it complicates the Taiwan unification momentum. The momentum towards China unification is now reaching a really high priority in Beijing. This is going to be achieved peacefully in three ways.
Right.
The dynamics through military deterrence,
Aggression.
through economic and diplomatic isolation, and through people-to-people exchanges. But then this rise of militarism puts spanner in the works.
Andrew, in regards to this incident, China argues that it is the restrained party. If that is the case, how does one explain the sharp rise in PLA and naval incursions? Japan reported over 800 scrambles last year, the highest in the entire region.
As I said, I mean, this is part of China's policy towards a momentum towards urging the Taiwanese authorities to come to the negotiation table through these three strategies: military deterrence, hence a rise of China's naval power, and drills and exercises, and also deploying of missiles and other weaponry against any a tilt on the Taiwanese authorities towards independence. Because the Taiwanese people, most of them do not want unification, nor do they want to declare independence. And what is more, a recent survey in Taiwan recently, over the last month or so, suggests that if, even though most people do not want unification, but if push comes to shove, if war does break out, over 50% of the Taiwanese people do not, repeat, not, want to defend Taiwan or risk their lives. So I think that you can see the dynamics are playing out towards this movement, pushing the Taiwan authorities towards the negotiating table, perhaps on a deal more generous than for Macau and Hong Kong. But on the other hand, the clock seems to be ticking, and then Takaichi's militarism, and also saying that what happens in Taiwan would affect Japan, that's put spanner in the works.
Andrew, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the region. And US President Donald Trump has announced that the United States will allow NVIDIA to export advanced artificial intelligence chips to China. This agreement, reached with Chinese President Xi Jinping, marks a significant shift in US export policy. Under the deal, NVIDIA's H200 chips will be sold to approved customers in China, subject to conditions ensuring US national security. Trump criticized the Biden administration's approach, which had required companies like NVIDIA to create modified, less powerful chips for China, calling it detrimental to innovation and American workers. The move has sparked criticism from congressional Democrats who argue it could aid China's military and economy. However, NVIDIA has expressed support for the decision, stating it will strengthen US manufacturing and jobs. Notably, the most advanced NVIDIA chips, such as the Blackwell and upcoming Rubin processors, remain restricted to US customers. Andrew joins us once again. How significant of a development is this in the export market, and especially in terms of the wider aspect of US and China trade relations?
The original American intention to contain the rise of China, apart from military deployment through the first island chain, second island chain, and so on, is to stifle China's technological advance, especially in the context of semiconductor, high-end semiconductor chips. These are very, very minute chips, as smaller than 3 nanometers. So nanometers, 1/1,000,000th of the width of a human hair. So you can see how small they are. So they are very, very advanced, and they're used in sometimes very high-end military hardware and software. So the idea is that by denying China's access, this will slow down China's technological advance. However, experience has shown that China is able to develop their chips, high-end chips, much more quickly. For example, Huawei, which was again the original target, is now doing quite well financially. Is also developing AI chips even, and then of course in the use of high-end technology that led to the breakthrough in the AI field, in the deep-seek AI field, which can achieve similar or higher results with much less energy compared with the huge investment in data centers in the United States. So all these breakthroughs are a warning bell to the United States. And of course, NVIDIA, having spent trillions of dollars developing these high-end chips, the only buyer, large buyer, is China. And so, and of course, the NVIDIA has a degree of influence over Trump, and hence Trump is now finding that it can't impose all his will on China completely, and hence this pause in the confrontation in a meeting in South Korea. So I think that this is all translates to the relaxation of some of these restrictions.
Okay, Andrew, do stay with us as we have further news updates. And moving on from that story, and the US Justice Department has accused 2 Chinese men of attempting to smuggle NVIDIA H100 and H200 chips to China. Fan Yugong, a Chinese citizen living in New York, and Benlin Yuan, a Canadian citizen from China, are facing charges for conspiring with a Hong Kong logistics company and a Chinese AI tech firm to bypass US export controls. Prosecutors allege the men used straw purchases and intermediaries, falsely labeling the chips as destined for US or third country customers. The operation, which prosecutors say has been active since November 2023, is part of a broader smuggling network aiming to funnel advanced AI technology to China. The Justice Department has described the scheme as a threat to national security. Another man, Alan Hao Hasu, has pleaded guilty in October for his role in the operation, which attempted to export at least $160 million in NVIDIA chips. Andrew joins us once again. in related to our story that we've just covered, and of course that last case of that there has been that individual was found guilty, the Department of Justice says that Chinese actors spent years trying to smuggle $160 million worth of H100 and H200 chips. Doesn't that justify that behavior, tighter controls and not loosen them?
Well, I think the argument on the other side, because of course the smuggling activities is not just happening in this particular case, and of course depends on the evidence. I'm not familiar with that, with those details, but smuggling does occur in other fields, in Russian sanctioned Russian oil, and Iran kind of the weaponry to Iran. I mean, there are all sorts of activities around the world. But as far as this particular case is concerned, apart from the reasons why, which I explained, in leading to the relaxation restrictions on China's high-end chips, resulting in China doubling down on ideological self-reliance and also a rapid advancement. And these cases of people who got arrested must be the old cases before this sudden relaxation of restrictions on the Navida trips, because you're talking about the legacy trips, H100, which is far more inferior, and then H200, which is now being relaxed only yesterday or something. So these must be old cases.
Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's been a pleasure to have you on the programme, as always. We now turn to our next story, and China's Premier Li Qiang says the impact of global tariffs has become increasingly evident this year, warning that trade barriers are putting new strain on the world economy. Speaking at a high-level summit in Beijing alongside leaders from the IMF, WTO and the World Bank, Li called for urgent reforms to global economic governance. He did not mention US President Donald Trump directly, but his comments come as China's trade surplus surpassed $1 trillion for the first time, driven in part by tariff-driven shifts in global supply chains. Economists say Trump's tariffs are diverting Chinese exports to other markets, increasing pressure on manufacturing sectors worldwide. Li also highlighted the growing role of artificial intelligence in trade, pointing to China's DeepSeek model and its impact on robotics, wearables, and advanced industries. Let's listen in to what the Chinese premier had to say.
从今年年初起，就有关税大棒在满世界挥舞，各种经贸限制措施不断的增多，可以说严重冲击了世界经济。随着事态的发展，关税损人损己的后果日益的显现，各方维护自由贸易的呼声也越来越强烈。
We move on once again, and China's Vice Commerce Minister Ling Ji has said that China welcomes European automakers to continue investing in China and collaborating with Chinese partners to promote the auto industry's green, intelligent transition. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has said that Ling has made the remarks during two recent meetings, first with Hildegard Müller, the president of the German Association of Automotive Industry, and the second with Ola Kalanikas, the president of the European Automobiles Manufacturers Association and chairman of the board of management of Mercedes-Benz Group AG. Meanwhile, Ling Ji expressed hope by saying that the German and European auto associations would leverage their influence to encourage the European Commission to work with China on finding a proper solution to the European Union's anti-subsidy investigation into electric vehicles as soon as possible. We move on once again, and New Zealand is revealing new details about a rare naval encounter in the Taiwan Strait. The Navy confirmed that its largest vessel, the HMNZS Artura, briefly crossed paths with a Taiwanese frigate during transit. The ship had already been shadowed by 7 Chinese warships, though officials say all kept a safe distance. New Zealand's Defence Force now confirms the ship also briefly encountered the Taiwanese frigate Cheng Kung, part of Taiwan's routine practice to escort friendly foreign vessels transiting the strait to deter possible Chinese interference. The incident highlights the growing tensions in the strait, where China has increased military pressure and even staged mock attack drills on foreign ships. Taiwan continues to welcome international transits as support for open navigation, while firmly rejecting Beijing's sovereignty claims. We stay in East Asia, and Japanese authorities have lifted tsunami warnings hours after a powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake shook northeastern regions of Japan, injuring at least 30 people and forcing about 90,000 residents to evacuate their homes. The earthquake struck off the coast at around 11:15 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Earlier, the Japan Meteorological Agency, or the JMA, said that following the earthquake, a tsunami as high as 10 feet could hit the country's northeastern coast. Warnings were issued for the prefectures of Hokkaido, Aomori and Iwate, and tsunamis from 20 to 70 centimeters high were observed at several ports. The JMA later downgraded the warnings to advisories and afterwards lifted all advisories. There were no reports of major damage. The epicenter of the quake was 80 kilometers off the coast of Aomori Prefecture at a depth of 54 kilometers. Okay, we're now joined by Dr. Asta Chadha. She is an associate professor of international relations at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, very happy you're okay. Second of all, Japan, of course, evacuated 90,000 people in a matter of hours. Japan is prone to earthquakes. However, disaster readiness standards have improved since 2011. How does it compare to that?
Well, I mean, I'm glad that, you know, the tsunami warning that was triggered was taken down very soon and no further damage had occurred. But, you know, as you mentioned, Japan has been very earthquake prone. And in fact, this time yesterday when we had the earthquake alarms sounding, it affected several prefectures of Japan, including Hokkaido, Aomori, and Iwate. And the expectation was that it could trigger a tsunami, you know, in those areas. And if you remember, last year, close to January, there was a tsunami and a huge earthquake. Mainly, it was the earthquake-related damage that occurred in the Noto Peninsula. So since 2011, of course, you know, Japanese government has become very, very both aware and also prepared to you know, respond very quickly to these disasters. And a couple of measures that have been functioning well for them are, you know, early warning systems, preparing these evacuation areas, allowing residents to, you know, move to a higher plane, assisting them in times of need, and also the fact that they've become very gender sensitive in the sense that, you know, women are provided, you know, medical supplies, women are provided specific spaces so that there is no occurrence of no discomfort of any kind. That being said, I also noticed that, you know, Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, apart from you know, voicing a concern this time, specifically, you know, when she set up the emergency task force, we saw her recently actually visit the Noto Peninsula and try and, you know, talk to people to ensure that everything was all right. So, I mean, overall, Japan has a very well-functioning tsunami warning system in place. In general, the buildings here are all earthquake resistant, so we do not really fear too much if there is, you know, a little bit of a building swaying here or there. It doesn't really impact us anymore. We've all gotten used to it in some way. And lastly, I think Japan has worked extensively on its infrastructure, not to forget specifically its nuclear power plants. Because, despite this earthquake, no issues were reported in any of the nuclear power plants in or around the area, and including some other fuel pre-processing plants as well. So overall, it has been very safe. We are all grateful. Thank God nothing happened. But that being said, we have been advised that we need to be on a watch out for the next 1 week at least. There could be recurring earthquakes. There could be more tsunami warnings following in the 1 week. I hope not, but that's what has been informed to us.
Yeah, and just briefly, what was the feeling last night when this tsunami warning was issued? Of course, we've said it. Japan's very prone to earthquakes. How do people react?
I mean, of course, this was very strong earthquake actually on Japan's own seismic intensity scale, which goes from 1 to 7. The tremors were registered in an upper 6. So that is quite high. And given that it was, an earthquake that happened at 11:15 p.m. Japan time, most people were already asleep. That being said, I must also tell everyone that's watching your channel that Japan does educate both children and its adults, to stay disaster prepared. So each house is equipped with a disaster preparedness kit that has almost all emergencies. And we are told, if there is anything such as a fire or an earthquake, if we need to evacuate, we need to rush with those bags that are usually equipped with the basic necessities. So, I mean, of course, it was a jolt. Thankfully, where I live, barely we felt anything because Kyoto is far off. But, to my friends who are living close to Hokkaido, they were really shaken. They were scared. But at the same time, they have sort of built that trust in their government that they know that their disaster preparedness measures always work.
Dr. Asta Chatter, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much for taking the time. Well, that's a wrap on the China Report for today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.